Good morning, everyone. I'm back here for another plant ID hike, focusing on spring ephemerals. It's now April 10th today, so we're moving along in the spring season. Plants are continuing to pop and come into bloom, so we're going to have a lot more to see out here today. Also, it's about a 50-degree sunny day, so a lot more of these species are going to have their flowers open today, so we'll get to see some really nice showy blooming species. I am at Salt Lick Land and Water Reserve in Valmeyer, Illinois. This is where the Illinois Ozark Bluff Country meets the Mississippi River floodplain. So I'll be walking along a trail that's about a mile long at the base of the bluff line. This is an area that a lot of moisture accumulates as it makes its way down the bluff to the floodplain. So you get a lot of blooming species here, a lot of rich flora, and we're definitely going to see that. As you can see behind me, there's a lot of large rocks at the base of the slope, and this is something that you call a talus slope. It's as these rocks break off the bluff, they fall to the bottom. It helps to create a little bit of microclimate for different species. So we get some really rock-loving species that will grow right up against the rocks where there's a lot of drainage. Soil actually stays a little bit drier, but we also have some of the floodplain floor here where you're going to have more of your species that like to have wet feet, that rely on having a constant supply of water. So it makes everything here really diverse and rich. And we'll definitely be seeing that. So let's go on our hike. All right, I'm walking slightly uphill to the first species I've spotted that I'd like to show you. It's this purple flowering one here. Pretty small plant, only about 12 inches or so tall. It's called Delphinium tricorn. It's known by the name dwarf larkspur. It has these highly separated leaves, and that's all one leaf you're looking at there, just big clefts to them. It has a nice dark purple colored flower, and you can see what's really unique about it is it has the spur that comes off the back of the flower. It's a modified petal. Usually has to do with pollination, and it makes it quite unique looking. I'm sure that's why it's called dwarf larkspur. It's got that spur in the name. So this is Delphinium tricorn. It's a true spring ephemeral. You typically find it at bases of slopes, which is right where we are. It is widespread. You can find it throughout Illinois, but typically at the base of slopes, not usually up on high ground or even in flat woods. And we can see this little one back here. It's the same species, but it has a lot more white to it. It's just a morph, really, variation in the coloration of the petals. It's very pretty also. He's much smaller right now. But this one is also Delphinium tricorn, or dwarf larkspur. I'm going to head a little bit further upslope here to the next species that I would like to show you. This one is called great waterleaf, which is Hydrophyllum appendilectatum. It's called great waterleaf because you can see the variation in leaf color. It looks almost like it has water droplets on its leaves. That's where it gets its name from. It has these very large, pretty purple flowers, 5 petals, and they are larger than thumbnail size, maybe about quarter sized. You can see the large phyllaries hanging from the flower. So this is giant waterleaf. It's probably in the 12 to 18 inch height range. And this also is a true spring ephemeral. You will only see this during the spring season. It will be entirely gone the rest of the year. And just over to my right is a population of Jack in the Pulpit that I taught you last go around. They are blooming. Hard to notice though because their flowers are green. not very, they don't grab your attention very easily like some of the more showy flowering species, but there's plenty of that out here as well. I have found an awesome spot along this trail at Salt Lick that is just teeming with celandine poppy. You can see all these yellow flowers with the bright green leaves. This is all celandine poppy, which is a true spring ephemeral. Its Latin name is Stylophorum diphyllum, and I'll get in closer for you. It has 4 very large yellow petals, and you can see the yellow anthers and pistil. So everything about the flower is a beautiful yellow color. You can see some of the flower buds here that have not yet bloomed. They're pretty fuzzy, hairy, as are the stems. You can see those long white hairs on them. The leaf is a very soft feeling leaf. It's highly dissected. Kind of almost looks a little bit like a fig leaf, maybe. This plant, I would say, is definitely in full glorious bloom right now. At this location, you can see that it runs up the slope there some, but it doesn't make it very far. It stays down here where there is a lot of moisture, and it is just doing awesome right now. You don't find these everywhere. They definitely stick to the base of slopes. They need a lot of moisture. I believe that they even need a little bit of calcareous conditions. So this is pretty cool to see here. Have some May-apples here also that we talked about last time with the big umbrella leaf. I don't see any blooming ones right now, but we might come across a few. Keep moving along. We have some more dwarf larkspur, Delphinium tricorn with the spur. And the cool one that we haven't talked about yet is wild ginger, which is back here, and it's these large kind of heart-shaped leaves. This one has a flower bud starting to form. Oh, here we go. I spotted one blooming for you. So this is a blooming wild ginger. It's a dark red, brown, bell-shaped flower that pretty much sits at ground level, pollinated by ants and flies. Wild ginger is pretty neat. It has a yellow colored sap that comes from its roots. It's a nice velvety feeling leaf as well. Makes a good ground cover actually. You can get dense stands of this and it's really quite attractive. Over to the right, we have a species we talked about last week, which is wake robin or red trillium. I believe I called it Trillium erectum last week, but actually I mix this up a lot. This one is Trillium recurvatum. When the flower is directly attached to the stem, it's not, the flower isn't on its own stalk. That's how you know it's Trillium revercatum. The 3 flowering petals that are a nice dark red color. And there's a really cool one behind it that is some sort of morph. It has a very thick stem, has very many leaves, and I don't even know how many petals. There's something wrong with this one. A little bit of a freak of nature, I guess. Pretty cool though. Neat looking one. Alright, I was drawn to this area by another yellow flowering species. It looks an awful lot like the celandine poppy, but if you remember I told you that the celandine poppy has 4 petals, where this one you can see has 5 petals. Flowers not quite as large. Leaf shape is still dissected, but quite a bit different. This is a ranunculus species. I'm not positive of which one exactly. I may look it up and add it in with a photo later when I do some editing, but this is a definite ranunculus species, typically called buttercups. Looks quite a bit like celandine poppy. It's quite a bit more common than celandine poppy. But I did see a zebra swallowtail butterfly floating around going to each of these, so it's definitely loved by the pollinators. Intermixed with this is a plant with somewhat longer leaf shape, a simple leaf shape, but it looks like it has this blood spot on there. Some people call it a thumbprint. And it right now is just low to the ground. It's not very tall yet. It's not a spring ephemeral. It's just starting to get going. It's called American Jumpseed. It's Persicaria virginiana. It gets quite a bit taller, and it has very, very small white flowers to it. And I'll probably try to include a photo for you of this one also, but that thumbprint on there with the dark brown color is very distinctive of this species. Very easy to notice. Move up this way a little bit further. We have a very delicate species that I would say is on its way out now. We are at the very end of its growing or its blooming time. This one has, again, yellow flowers that are very tiny. This one is known as Pale Corydalis. It has these very lacy leaves to it also. Pale Corydalis, Latin name is Corydalis fluva. Pretty easy to remember. But you notice the shape of these leaves, definitely designed to draw in pollinators. A little bit of like a landing strip there before you reach where the pollen is. Not a common one to come across at all. If you can spot it, first of all, it's so tiny it's difficult, but if you can spot it, you're pretty lucky. There's not too many places, it's not very widespread, and it never shows up in dense populations like the bluebells, May-apples, or even the celandine poppy does. So it's really pretty, it's hard to notice, and it's a real special one. Alright, I'm right here along the edge of the trail that abuts directly to the cliff at this point. And you can see there's just full glorious bloom of Virginia bluebells. We talked about this one last time, Mertensia virginiana, Virginia bluebells. But now we have them in full bloom so that you can easily see the bell-shaped, periwinkle-colored, delicate flowers. They have quite a few that are at the end of the plant, and then there'll be a few along the stem there. What's really cool about this species is it will often bloom in different colors. So these are some white ones that you could see next to the blue. Sometimes you'll even see them in a dark pink color, and they'll be mixed in. It's just a morph that happens with the genes in the plant. Mixed in with that is a non-spring ephemeral. This is a wild lettuce. Sometimes this one's called lion's foot. It's Prenanthes alba, most likely Prenanthes alba, but definitely a Prenanthes species. It has a very supple leaf that's soft, and you can even see in the light that it's just finely pubescent, has really small little hairs to it. It gets much, much taller. Right now it's only maybe a foot and a half taller, but this will easily get up to 3-4 feet, maybe even taller. And it'll bloom with a white colored flower in the summertime. And just down here, we have another one that's a treat. And this is woodland phlox. Its Latin name is Phlox divaricata. It's a very deep purple color in comparison to the Virginia bluebells that looks more periwinkle bluish colored. Has 5 petals that are quite large. Definitely can see how that attracts pollinators. It has opposite leaves. Let me find a better one. There we go. Opposite leaves that connect directly to the base. There is no stem or petiole connecting the leaf to the stem. And then at the base of that, you can see there's a couple flower buds, and it will often bloom there. So that's Phlox divaricata. You can see it in bigger clumps at times. It is pretty common. It doesn't take over areas like the Virginia bluebells or the celandine poppy does, but you'll see it scattered throughout. It's actually a pretty common one for landscaping purposes. So my new quest has turned into finding Dutchman Breaches, another spring ephemeral. Again, these are their lacy leaves. They're mostly past their prime here. In fact, you can see a lot of them have their seed pods already. But I'd be really sad if I missed out on finding you a pair of Dutchman pantaloons to see, because they're pretty neat. So I'm in a spot with quite a few pods of Dutchman Breaches. On the hunt for, ooh, here's some more. Aha! Okay. Yes. All right, we have found Dutchman Breaches. Only one pair of pants, and they are stuck to another species right now. Get out of here. There we go. They are a pair of upside down pants. That's why we call them Dutchman Breaches. They hang like this. They're quite a unique looking flower, but you can see that they hang at the bottom. They hang their anthers out. They have a white flower to them. I believe they are pollinated by butterflies and things like that. One pair of pantaloons. That's the win for today. It's the only ones I've seen, actually. So they are, at least at this location, finishing up flowering, setting seed, which they will distribute. It is a perennial species, so it comes back in the same spots every year, and they're pretty neat when they're in full bloom. This whole stem will be lined with upside down pants. Quite fun. Dutchman Breaches. Alright, I spied a cool leaf here walking along the trail that unfortunately has no flower yet, but don't worry. Probably in a couple weeks I'll be able to get you some of the flowers. It's a single leaf that comes out of the ground, has white spots to it, like you've seen actually a lot of these spring ephemerals have. This leaf has much more of a waxy, shiny coating to it that makes it stick out. If you kind of think about it, it looks a little bit like a tongue. So this one's called Dogtooth Violet. Oh, look it. I'm spying some more Dutchman Breaches pantaloons. These ones are almost all dried up. How about that? Wasn't even looking for them and they showed up. But back to the Dogtooth Violet, also called trout lilies. It's Erythronium species. There's a yellow flower and a white flowering species. Based off of some preliminary research, I think the yellow trout lily is the one that's mostly here, so I'm guessing this is going to bloom with a beautiful upside down bell-shaped yellow flower, and like I said, in a couple weeks. You can get whole forest floors covered in this where all you see are just these leaves coming up, especially sites that aren't very diverse in the flora. If you have this one, it looks like just a bunch of elliptical shaped leaves sticking out of the ground. Alright, so I've been following along the base of the talus slope here, and I was excited to spy a species that I didn't even know this site had. Let's start at the bottom. You can see it has very purple colored stems to it, and it has all these stalks that are coming out of the base. Some are quite thin, and this one has two thicker ones, and those will be the flowering stems. And then you get these compound leaves with little leaflets that have rounded lobes to them. I would call that a medium green color. What's really a great way to identify this is the purple stems against the green leaves. It's quite obvious. And these ones are coming to a bloom and are not yet in bloom. These flowering stalks are, I don't know, maybe a foot and a half tall. They are not yet blooming, but they have the flower buds on them. And you can even see as it's forming, that these will have spurs off the backs of the petals. And so this species here is wild columbine, which you typically find on dry sites. So I'm a little bit surprised with its location, but that maybe perhaps just there's enough drainage here, enough sun here to keep it dry enough for these species. So this is wild columbine. It's quite rare. It's really beautiful. It's a large flower. I'll try to include a photo for you since we don't actually get to see this one in bloom. It's not a true spring ephemeral. Its leaves will persist all summer. It'll probably bloom late spring, May or so. And I was disappointed a little bit further. After being so excited, I was disappointed to find some garlic mustard. So you can see these have 4 petals, white petals, clusters of flowers at the top. The leaves are a heart-shaped leaf with a scalloped edge to them. And if you pluck a leaf, crush it in your hands and smell it, it has a little bit of a garlic smell. This is super invasive garlic mustard. It is a European species that was brought over with our early pioneers to the area. My final species I'm going to leave you with today is Bloodroot. Fortunately, it is not in flower right now. They have these seed pods, they're elliptical green shaped seed pods you can see. This is Bloodroot. It is Sanguinaria canadensis. Has a very unique shaped leaf. These ones are actually huge. They're about the same size as my hand. They're pretty. They come up with a single white flower that has many petals to it. The root has an amber red color sap that they say Native Americans used as a natural dye, so that's where the name Bloodroot comes in from. Sometimes kids like to pull up the root and give themselves little tattoos on their skin with it. But it's a great spring ephemeral species, one that everyone loves to have. I really had to crawl through some brush to find these ones. I haven't seen much of it here. Like I said, unfortunately, it all looks like it's past the prime, but it's a good one. So I'll leave you with that final leaf. Okay, that's all I have for you today. Got to look at quite a few more flowering species, which was really fun, and a really big diversity. I'm going to include a list of all the species that I showed you at the very end of this video. That way you can use it as a reference if you're going out for a hike and you're trying to see these species, or you go somewhere that has a lot of spring ephemerals and you want to be able to remember the names and identify them. I hope this video is helpful to you, and we'll see you next time.